Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Great amendment, maybe the best amendment we've heard so far. Please vote yes. I'm going to try to bring the conversation back to the amendment. A couple of terms we need to consider, Mr. Speaker. LEA, MSOC, and assessment. LEA, this amendment would move off the LEA. We call it local effort assistance here. You've already heard a few other speakers trip over the old thing we called it, which was levy equalization. Basically what this is it is designed within the kind of rigid constructs of the McCleary decision to give some support to districts that have lower property values overall than other districts that have higher property values. It's a good intent. It's a good in spirit, Mr. Speaker. It's a complete dumpster fire in terms of its implementation. And many of the small districts, including almost all the school districts in my legislative district, are unsatisfied with the way that LEA is structured currently and the effort and the assistance it gives them. MSOC, materials, supplies, and overhead or operating costs. MSOC has become a sort of catch-all term for the cost to operate schools, and it's the error buffer from all the inadequacies in our so-called McCleary fix. And it's ended up becoming kind of the catch-all for the shortcomings and failures of the McCleary fix. It transfers on to school districts, usually funded through local levies or local funds, these essential operating costs that, as other speakers have said, rightly ought to be covered by us, covered by the state. And then finally, Mr. Speaker, the idea of assessed values or assessments and their effect on the overall property tax burden, which this amendment also tries to clarify and lighten on people. The problem we've got when we start talking about this 1%, 3% automatic increase thing, Mr. Speaker, is that isn't the real problem. I mean, it's a problem, but it's not the real problem. The real problem is the assessed value that's charged to property owners and homeowners, and the thing that's breaking the backs of homeowners living on fixed incomes is the way we assess taxable value is from Alice in Wonderland. It is started with the budgets that are required by the state or by local jurisdictions. They determine the assessed value for tax purposes of property, not the market value. So it's not that your house has doubled in value in the last few years. It's that the budget demands of the taxing districts have doubled. And your assessed value is essentially a fiction created to fund that. And then the 1% automatic increase currently, or the 3%, or Lord knows what it'll be, 4%, 5%, 7% automatic increase on top of that, that's been proposed, ends up being a force multiplier on this assessment that's from Alice in Wonderland. Mr. Speaker, what this amendment does, and the reason that you should vote yes, and the reason that it may be the most important amendment we're going to consider tonight, is that it attempts, and I think pretty effectively, rationalizes all of these elements. The screwed up local effort assessment program, which means to do well but isn't that effective. This sort of shell game of MSOC, which ought to be paid for by us but is being sloughed off onto the local taxpayers and the local school districts. And the absolutely bonkers notion of how we calculate property taxes in this state. Now, it is impressive to me that one amendment can do a pretty good job of fixing 3 different screwed up elements in tax policy and public policy on school funding. I mean, shoot, this amendment ought to be the whole bill. It's a good amendment, Mr. Speaker, and if we don't say yes to this amendment, If we don't say yes to funding MSOC, we're missing the opportunity to do the thing that I hear the most right now from teachers and administrators about. I mean, we've talked a lot about homeowners and taxpayers here, but when I hear from teachers and administrators in my district and elsewhere around the state, they're talking about MSOC and how it's underfunded and they want to see it funded better. This is a chance to vote yes on better funding for that portion of the operating costs of our schools. So, I mean, this is your chance, Mr. Speaker, to do something to satisfy those teachers and those administrators, at least the ones who are actually in the building, those administrators, to help them. You know, you hear all these stories about how the teacher has to buy pencils for the kids. That's MSOC. If we do better with MSOC, then the teachers doesn't have to do that, or at least the pressure is taken off the teacher to have to do that. A yes vote here, Mr. Speaker, is a yes vote for better funding of these materials, supplies, and operating costs. It's the remainder from the fault in our attempt to fix McCleary. This is an important thing. If we don't want to have to deal with a McCleary redo, a McCleary 2.0 or whatever, if we don't have to face those same problems again, vote yes on this amendment, Mr. Speaker. Without this amendment, the underlying budget, it's just shuffling chairs in the Titanic, and we're going to be back dealing with the problem that MSOC represents, with the problem that LEA represents, with the problem that our screwed up property tax calculation represents, all over again. The budget doesn't fix it. This amendment, it's very well done, Mr. Speaker. It fixes these problems. This is a rare opportunity, Mr. Speaker. Seize it. Vote yes on this amendment.